Hello and welcome to the ImprovMed Show. I'm your host, Kelsey Sherwood. In this episode, we will interview Claudia Moran, a school-based occupational therapist in North Little Rock, Arkansas, who has improv experience under her tool belt. We'll delve into Claudia's career journey, her insights on the impact of improv in occupational therapy, and the transformative power it holds for healthcare professionals. With that, let's get started. How you doing today, Miss Claudia Moran?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. Well, let's start off with the questions. Can you briefly tell us about your career and how you got into improv?
I am an occupational therapist in the North Little Rock School District. I guess I got into occupational therapy kind of in a backward way. It wasn't my goal when I went to school. I didn't really know what it was, but I worked out at Camp Aldersgate, and then when I found out that there was a career where you were doing the same kind of things that you got to do as a camp counselor, helping kids learn how to be more independent, I was like, oh, that's for me. So, and then I guess my first introduction to improv, other than just on TV, was I had a classmate in OT school that joined an improv group while she was in OT school, and so we went and went to some of her shows and participated in some of that. And when my girls were in middle school, they were in a Destination Imagination group, and I was their group leader. And our activity that we did was improv, and so we worked on lots of different scenarios, and they had to figure out how to act things out that were going to be a surprise, and they weren't going to know what it was until they got there. So that's kind of my history of improv and my goal. I've worked in pediatric therapy almost exclusively. I worked for a little while in nursing homes as an aide before I went to OT school as an OT aide, but besides that, I've done all pediatrics.
Well, I love that. And how does improv translate to being an OT, especially in the school setting?
I think for me, where I see the crossover the most is that you have to be able to adapt when you're doing improv, and there's a lot of that in the school. You can have things laid out or plans made, but wherever your kid is where your therapy has to go. So if you have a big plan to do a handwriting activity and your kid's hanging from the ceiling, you're going to have to figure out how to change what's going on quickly, kind of like you do in improv. When you have one idea about what you're going to say, and then they throw a twist in there and you've got to change it around. I feel like I do a lot of that as an OT in the schools.
Yeah, it's hard to get them, especially okay, I want you to do this, and then it goes completely in different direction.
Mm-hmm. That happens sometimes.
How do you apply role playing or improv into your sessions? Can you give a specific example?
I think especially I work in the day treatment, and so a lot of my kids there have behavioral problems, and so my goal for them is to get them to do what I want them to do, and for them to want to do that. And I think a lot of times if you come head on, like saying, write your letters or draw this picture or whatever, that's not going to happen. So you kind of got to sneak around the back way. And I think that's where improv does come in, that you've got to be ready to throw out. So we're not just walking to the therapy room. Are you ready to go on a hunt? Okay, let's see what we can find going down this hall, which I feel like you have to do that a lot sometimes. And it's not just that, come sit at the table which chair are you going to pick? I don't know. I think he's going to pick the red chair. Which chair? Oh, he picked the blue chair, which I feel like a lot of that goes into the same stuff that you see at improv.
Mm-hmm. Like making everything a game.
Yes. Well, that, and also like to be able to set an example. I think about social stories, where you have it specifically laid out how you want them to do that. And if you just repeat the social story, sometimes you don't get as much of a response as if you're having them act out the social story with you or join in with you or give you a response to that. So I think that that's a lot of things to help them kind of understand what you're wanting in a fun way that makes them think a little bit.
What specific skills do students develop through medical improv that aid their adaptability and problem solving? Like specifically OT students.
So, like if I have a student that I'm the teacher, not like a student, not like a kid we're working with, but somebody that's like they're doing their field work.
Yes.
That kind of student. Well, I think that it can help them understand a little bit of empathy with the kids. If you think about in order to do improv, you have to if you want to get your student to do something improv, then you're it's hard for me with student. So we're going to say my fieldwork student. If I want my fieldwork student to learn how to do a specific skill with their kid that they're working with, then I think by acting it out ahead of time or giving them examples and helping them figure out their role ahead of time and throwing in different things that might come up, it gives them a chance to understand what might happen and gives them a little understanding of what their student is going through, the kid they're working with is going through. So I think it gives them a little bit of empathy and it helps them problem solve, and you're able to give them cues as to what. So like while we're doing this role, we're doing this pretend without the kid, or we're trying this without, and it gives them some ideas of what might happen, which makes you feel a little more secure whenever you're actually doing the treatment or carrying out what you want to have happen.
Are there any memorable moments or like success stories that stand out from your experience, like either from a fieldwork student that you're helping with treating a kid, or with your experience that you had to apply to improv in this situation?
I think sometimes, in the schools, you have lots of different people that are relying on you. While you're helping the student gain these skills, you're also trying to help the teacher learn or the paraprofessional learn different ways to deal with things that are happening. And I think that when you do that, it kind of goes back to what we are saying before about like the games. When you're modeling that and they're seeing that gives them more strategies. So, like, for a specific thing I think about, we do a group in our STAR classroom, which is what we call our classrooms for our children with autism. And so I do the OT, the PT, and the speech. I'll do a group in there every week, and so we incorporate all our different needs, what different goals from all of our different disciplines into the group. And then we also have the paras and the teacher in there. And so I feel like by doing that kind of stuff and then changing it around, so we're not just saying, I want you to pick this up and put it over here, but oh, it's time to clean up. Who's going to be the first to the trash can? It gives them a way to do it that maybe they hadn't thought about that before. And now we have some really good paras in some of our rooms, and so a lot of them have those strategies, but it's always nice to get a different idea about ways to do things.
All right, I love that. What future directions do you see the use of like improv in occupational therapy or in healthcare in general?
I think well, I hadn't really thought about it until you came to me and were talking to me about it. And then I realized that a lot of what we do, a lot of what I do, I actually do use those same skills. And I think it's a great tool for people that are learning it. So like for someone who's doing an internship and for your kids, it's a great tool for both of them to just be able to have a little social learning, so like So like you can do it and it's not just directed at you have to learn this skill, but like what we're doing as a group and we're going to take turns and we're doing things back and forth. I think about how many of my games actually that we do that play into that you have to say, "Oh, what are we going to do now? Oh, you want us to all clap? Okay." So then even those kind of things where you're having to throw something out and respond to that, even something specific or something more generic. Oh, we're all going to be what? We're going to be butterfly caterpillars. How are we going to do that? Like those kind of things, I think are great ways for everybody to learn to think on their feet and for kids to respond and to give them ideas about how to react, even if it's something silly, that you can just figure out what you can do, even if it's a silly thing.
What advice would you give to other school-based occupational therapists interested in using medical improv or role play to teach fieldwork students?
I think you got to be willing to try whatever works. That's what I think about that. I think there are lots of different ways that you can do it. And if lots of people have different personalities, and if you find something that works for a certain personality, then let's use that. So if you're having a student that's having an intern that's having a hard time understanding you saying this, and then when the kid gets off track, you got to figure out what to do. If you throw some of that improv in there and have them respond to that, then you might get a better response from them and have a more successful outcome, which I feel like with improv, it gives you a little more flexibility. So it's not so black and white. It's not so you fail or you don't fail. And it gives you a way to think about things later, like, oh, I could have done that, but that doesn't mean that what you did was wrong. So you can think of ways that you could have improved on that. So I do think that it's a great idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just a lot of reflection on
Yeah.
that part.
Yeah.
Can you lead us through a simple improv exercise that listeners can try out to understand its benefits?
I think if you think about like with your kids at school, like if you're having, especially for like conflict resolution, sometimes if you do an improv thing that takes it away from them. So say Billy's at your desk, he's at my seat. Oh no, he's at your seat. What are we going to do now? He's at our seat. Joe, what would you do if Billy was at your seat? And then Joe can say, I'd take his chair. Oh no, would you take his chair? Should we take his chair? What can we do? Okay, so what can you do? And so all of that kind of stuff, when you're thinking about, we're diffusing the situation and we're trying to come up with things that would work. And so why don't we ask Billy to move? Oh, hey, how could we ask Billy to move? Get out of my chair. Oh no, is that a nice way? So I feel like if you do that and you go back and forth, that all of that is just like improv. And also we were talking about like any games. When you make a game out of something, that's what happens. It's just like improv. So I think as far as dealing with your students, and the same thing goes with your interns, if you're like, oh, so he won't write that for you, what could we do there? Let's see. What if you could get him to write a T? So let's start with that. Get him to write a T. Those kind of things. And that makes it feel like you're collaborating and you're giving them cues and you're giving them things without making them feel like they're not being successful. That everybody's winning that way.
Right. Love that. Like it kind of like reminds me of like, actions and the consequences, or like just like this is what you do if that happens, and then this is what's gonna happen, sort of. Mm-hmm. Like with Billy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in different ways to make it so it's not just like this. So it's not Billy against Susie, whose chair he stole. Like, yes, we're going to get Billy out of the chair, but there's lots of different ways to do that.
Right. All right. Last question. Any final thoughts or additional advice you'd like to share with our listeners?
I think that the most important thing in any kind of situation when you're working with kids is to build that relationship. And I do think that when you come at it from a playful way, where, and not that I don't have rules, because I sure got rules in my room, um, but if you have that relationship first, that's the most important thing. And that certainly improv is a way to build that relationship, so it's a fun, so that even though they work hard with Miss Claudia, they know that Miss Claudia loves them, and we have fun in her room, and we have to do lots of work, but it's fun. So
Kind of reminds me of like the one rule that improv is like to make your scene partner look good. And you want to do that for your client. Like you want to make them look good, feel good about themselves, what they're doing.
yeah, I didn't know that rule in improv. I didn't know that specific rule, but that's exactly right. You want everyone to be successful, and you don't want your success to come at their expense.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Miss Claudia, for joining in on this podcast. I really appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome. Anytime.
All right.
It was fun.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you for sharing your stories and your wisdom. I really appreciate it. Thank you for listening to this episode of the ImprovMed Show with myself and Claudia Moran. Please stay tuned for next week's episode where I will be interviewing Katrina Hughes, a speech-language pathologist who opened her own improv company called the Comfort Table Improv Collective. Please check my Instagram page at ImprovMed and my YouTube channel called ImprovMed to learn more about medical improv. Shout out to Doug Royson at Palmer Music who recorded and edited this podcast. See you next time.